All right, here we go. Today we have Manny Arora, an attorney who's represented high-profile clients such as Lil Durk, Gucci Mane, Adam Pac-Man Jones, but most recently he helped secure Hernandez Goan's acquittal on all murder charges related to young Dolph's murder. Manny, welcome to Vlad TV.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you just sat in on the interview with your client, but you have a very interesting story by yourself, so I just want to get into all that. Now, what made you become a lawyer in the first place?
It was pure dumb luck. I was a nuclear engineer, had my degree, was going to go into the military, and thought I was going to be a pilot because I was joining the Air Force. Back then in the 80s, there was no LASIK or any of that stuff, so my eyes, my last year of college, weren't 20/20 anymore, so they threw me out of the flight school program. And then said, what else would you like to do? And I said, well, I was good at debate in high school, so maybe I'll just go to law school. So I applied to one law school, got in, got my degree, went into the Air Force, what they call a JAG program, Judge Advocate. And nobody wanted to do the trials there, so the boss said, you're the prosecutor for the base, essentially. And I did a ton of trials over 4 years, both as a prosecutor and as the base public defender. And I got good at it, and it just sort of stuck.
So at what point you actually worked for the Fulton County DA's office?
After I left active duty, I joined the reserves, but at that point you have to have a civilian job, and that's when I joined the Fulton County DA's office.
Okay, and you tried major crimes.
Right. There were 7 of us in what they call the major case unit. So that would be murders or, really high value drug cases and stuff like that.
So when you talk about Fulton County DA, Fonnie Willis is the current DA.
Yes.
What's your overall take, just as a side note, over the whole YSL case, considering you worked in the same department?
I think she's a few years younger than me, so she came in. We may have overlapped while I worked there. I'm not sure. We had about 100 lawyers at the office. The YSL case, I don't know if I necessarily have a problem with the DA. I mean, aside from the shenanigans that all came out, but that's more of a personal issue. The case itself could have been done in a couple of months if you really pare it down to what had happened. And frankly, I think the judge just let this thing get out of control.
The original judge?
The original judge, he did 90% of it, then the other judge took over, and it just went out of control. But I have a problem with the office, with the way they bring cases. We worked for Trump's lawyer on the Trump indictments that came down, and we got our guy's case sealed up. He did a year's probation, on it. But it's all just overblown, right? It's dramatized. All they do is go for publicity, hype it up. And it's just like they used to say in Texas, it's all hat and no cattle. And we seem to have a lot of that in that office. And it just brings the profession down. And that's my biggest beef.
Okay, so in 2001, you went from being in the DA's office to actually doing defense.
Yes.
And you go into criminal law.
Yes.
Is there a reason for it? Now you're on the other side.
Right. Criminal law is the only thing I've ever known because I did both sides in the military. Mm-hmm. And the DA's job, unless it's like a lifelong passion where you just want to put people in prison, it's kind of a dead-end job. You're not going to make much money. And I was about to have my second kid. And, my wife said, it's kind of a dead-end job. What's your ambition? I said, I'd kind of like to be a big cheese in a big market. And so she said, well, let's give it a try. And I think one of the best 2 lawyers happened to be in the same firm, Don Samuel and Ed Garland. And, they were kind enough to give me an opportunity with them. We became partners, and I was there for 6+ years. And then I started my own practice because I really believe in helping poor people. There's only so much stuff in life you can buy. I don't need a private jet. I don't need fancy cars. As long as I've got a house and I can pay my kids' tuition. Now they're both gone, so I've got a huge raise the last couple of years after they graduated. I've had the flexibility to take on passion projects like Mr. Govan's case. As soon as you win one of these, and I'm doing this TV, people are going to see it, they're going to call me like crazy. I just can't do everybody's. We do this every now and again because you put your heart and soul into it. And unfortunately, we need paying clients. I've got 5 lawyers I've got to feed. And so occasionally, every year and a half, 2 years, I'll find a case like this that comes to me. We've handled litigation in 22 different states. And I really like to get out of Georgia and experience new things because after 31 years in the business, I feel like I'm almost on autopilot on some things. So challenges are really very, very stimulating like this case.
Well, your biggest case came in 2005 over the Gucci Mane murder case.
Right. So, everybody knows these folks now, but I think I'm the guy that tries to stay under the radar. And all these guys, before they became famous, had problems. And that's when we represented them. Mr. Gucci Mane, I used to call him Gucci Man until my daughter had to correct me. We got his murder case dismissed short of indictment. Some other rappers you mentioned have come. Cases dismissed short of indictment. The football player with a triple shooting in Las Vegas. I think we made up a crime to take a plea to. His time served to a misdemeanor conspiracy to commit a crime or something. I don't even remember what it was.
Let's talk about the Gucci case.
Okay.
Because that was a big deal in the hip-hop world. So the backdrop was this. Gucci Mane and Young Jeezy were both relatively new rappers in Atlanta. Both of them had a lot of heat around them. They did one song together, a song called Black Tees, where Jeezy jumped on a Gucci song. And then they did another song together called So Icy. There was, depending on who you talk to, there was some, argument over, who's going to have that song. I think Gucci wanted it for his album. Jeezy wanted it for his album because he had a big album coming out on Def Jam at the time. And some diss records started going back and forth. Jeezy had a song where he put a $10,000 bounty on Gucci Mane's chain. And on May 10th, a situation happened where Gucci and allegedly some associates met a girl at a strip club. They went back to her house, and a couple guys rushed into the house, one of which was an associate that was actually signed to Young Jeezy, a guy named Pookie Loke. Describe, from your point of view, what happens next.
Well, first of all, I never understood any of that stuff back then because I'm still stuck in like the 80s rock era.
Right.
So it's all fancy to me, and I need young people to explain all this stuff to me. But essentially, 3 men, if I remember correctly, it's been 20 some odd years, broke into his place, armed, and Gucci had a gun. He opened fire, and I guess he had better aim than the other folks. And so, of course, the police arrest you, and he's sitting in custody. We then get my team together. We dig through everything possible. And at a very reasonable DA in DeKalb County, Georgia, which is just like a suburb of Atlanta. And, they listened. We had really intellectually good talks, legally speaking. Even if they believed we may have done something wrong, they knew they couldn't prove it. And they ended up saying, you know what? That's just the right thing to do. So they dismissed all the charges. He was released from jail after X number of months. And next thing you know, he signs with Atlantic Records. For some reason, put an ice cream cone on his face. And, he just blew up from there. And I don't know if I've talked to him in 15 years or something. And he's had a great career, and good for him.
Well, my favorite Gucci Mane song called Heavy, where he raps, and I just got out of jail, they tried to Michael Vick me. I gave my lawyer $500,000 and told him come and get me.
Yeah,
you ever heard that before?
People say that's supposed to be about me, and I was like, well, he knew my name. You think he could have put it in there just so my daughter would be impressed with something I've done in life. But I may disagree with the number, but we did help him out and all that kind of stuff.
So it wasn't $500,000?
We'll just leave it at that.
Okay. And ultimately, they never even charged him.
Correct. Well, he was arrested, but people misunderstand this. Police charge you by arresting you, but the DA brings the official charges. So there was no indictment. That's how it processes. So you're sitting in jail on police charges, which essentially mean nothing, but the DA chose not to prosecute.
How do you feel about Gucci kind of rapping about the situation later on? There was like this famous line where it was a diss song aimed at Jeezy where he said something like, go and dig your homeboy up, bet you won't say shit.
Yeah. They've got money, they've got success. It's just like, move past it. It's like, who cares? I've never understood it. Even with Mr. Govan's case and the CMG PRE, it's like, you're both making more money than you can possibly spend. Life's grand. You've gotten out of the difficult part of town. What's the point of it all, shooting back and forth? It's just, enjoy your life and make it better. I'm glad he passes out some turkeys and things like that, but think how much more you could really do if you really wanted to apply yourself. But, I digress, but let's just keep going. I just don't get it.
Yeah. Well, and then in 2007, you represented NFL player Pac-Man Jones.
Right. He'd broken my heart because he didn't go to Georgia Tech where we'd recruited him because our coaching staff changed over and he goes to West Virginia. He goes number 6 overall to Tennessee, probably one of the fastest, most electric players I've seen, even though his stature wasn't that big. And then for some reason, he just gets in trouble. He was in Atlanta, got in trouble, happened to call our office. We got him out of it. Then there was some other little stupid things, you spit on somebody or you punched on somebody. And then it sort of all hit the fan in Las Vegas at the NBA All-Star weekend where he was accused of shooting at 3 people. And supposedly this was all on video. And all you ever heard on the news is the video will show this and the video will show that. And it was amazing when we saw the video, it didn't really show any of that, but that sort of never got out in the public eye for some reason, but people talked a lot. The team cut him. Nobody would touch him. So because I'm just a sucker for bad stories, I, studied and became an NFL agent for him. And we worked out the first trade for a player who was suspended from Tennessee to Dallas. Jerry Jones, I know he takes a lot of heat out there, but he couldn't have been more kind than any. I've never met a billionaire before, but he was the first, had us over to his house a couple times. We talked just as kind as possible, treated us wonderfully. Then we had Adam come over with him. He looked in my eye and said, can you fix this? And we worked on the alcohol issues. And, I thought everything was good from there. And of course, it turned out after he got the job and I did all that, he had a relapse and, Dallas let him go about 2/3 of the way in the season. And then I just sort of lost touch because, I put my credibility out there with all our clients and I really expect them to be a certain way. But, sometimes your demons are just always there. And it's just something I couldn't go back to. And I know he's had some more problems since then, but he seems to be doing well now. And I'm really hoping he and his daughter just are succeeding.
Well, yeah, I mean, that incident in Las Vegas was very serious. It was a triple shooting that left a bouncer paralyzed.
Correct.
Did they find the actual shooter?
Yeah, they found the actual shooter as far as that goes. It took some time. We had to point them in the right direction with regards to the evidence and stuff. So it's like, I say a lot of times I end up doing the work for everybody because when the press is there, everybody just wants to make a rush to judgment on something without going through everything. And so we went through it all. And, there were bouncers saying racial epithets. There was just a lot more to it. There was an attack by one of the bouncers. Shots were fired. And, somebody got paralyzed. And it's tragic, but it's like we distort reality to suit the narrative of what the victim wants to say. And it just doesn't happen that way. And people jump online and say whatever. But again, thankfully, if you put in the work, usually a good result comes out.
Well, didn't you end up suing Pac-Man because he didn't pay you for some other legal fees?
That was just me being angry because, I put my heart and soul into it, became an agent and all that kind of stuff. I dropped the case. We'd gotten the judgment, but I never pursued it because I was just like, what are you doing? I took the choice, but not getting paid fully up front. And sometimes you just take a chance. And yes, I sued. And then I just dropped it after I won the judgment. I was just like, don't even bother. It's okay.
Well, then in 2019, you represented Lil Durk.
Yes.
In an attempted murder case in Atlanta.
Yes.
What was that overall case?
There's a really famous spot called the Varsity in downtown Atlanta. If anybody goes there, that's where you get your chili dogs and all that kind of stuff. And there's a nightclub across the street from the Varsity. And apparently all these people from Chicago were down. I don't know if it was a Super Bowl or something like that. It was right after, I want to say the Super Bowl, but you'll have to remind me correctly. But it was some event that happened in Atlanta. Maybe it was Final Four or something like that. And one of the people that had an issue with Durk and his colleagues was there. Somebody owed somebody some money. Maybe it was over girls. And unfortunately, everybody is armed to the teeth these days. And so the victim apparently shot first. They shot back. I said Durk didn't shoot. State came up with, well, we've got it all on video because, there's cameras everywhere in that part of town, or frankly, all over Atlanta. And they arrested him, of course. I asked for a bond. We go in there. And the DA is just like, Judge, we'll have it indicted by the end of the week. Don't give him a bond. We've got video, this and that. And it was a judge that had recently been elected, used to be a public defender in the past. And he just said, hey, it can't be more than 10 seconds of relevant video. If you got it, show it to me. They wouldn't. So I think he sensed the BS in there because that video didn't happen. I'd already gone to the Varsity, talked to their head of security and looked at it. It was super grainy. You couldn't tell who was doing what. But because there's somebody And Durk wasn't quite who he is now, right? He wasn't super famous back then. He still had that little blonde thing going, and he had a house in Atlanta. And so we got him out, and then the case just sat and sat and sat. And like 2 years later, you get this order saying, we think there's enough evidence, but we don't know if we can prove it. And so we declined to prosecute, sort of like the Gucci situation.
Well, right, because this situation involved King Von as well. Now, you did not represent King Von.
No, he was a co-defendant. I couldn't represent him. Yeah.
Got it. Because the police accused Durk and Von of shooting the victim, robbing him of cash, jewelry, and a vehicle, and engaging in gang-related violence. They found probable cause back in May of 2019 for criminal attempt to commit murder, aggravated assault, participation in criminal street gang activity, possession of a firearm during commission of a felony, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. So there was a lot there.
Yeah, there's actually more than 2 people charged for all of that stuff. And the thing about Atlanta is, and that's one of the knocks I have with our DA, everything's either a RICO, as you learned from the YSL case, or everybody's a gang member. If you've got a tattoo and you hang out with a couple other folks, you're in a gang. That's just how it works. And the reason we do that in Georgia is if you can imply to the judge that there's a gang connection in your indictment, the rules of evidence relax a lot. And their backgrounds, their prior history, even if you were smoking marijuana, suddenly becomes admissible evidence. So they charge a lot of gang cases in our town. And so it skews and it makes the world think we're full of gangs, and that's just the charge du jour. It's an easier way to get a conviction. And so they lit him up with all those kinds of things. The judge thankfully saw through it, gave us a bond. He's out performing, doing music. He could do whatever. And then 2 years later, the indictment that was supposed to come at the end of the week never materialized. And somebody with a brain actually looked at it and said, there's nothing here.
Well, there was an article that was floating around, which actually ended up being fake, which I just found out. But basically, they were claiming that the prosecution said that if King Von was still alive, then he would be charged for this crime. But that wasn't even a real article.
Well, it wouldn't make any sense. They were co-defendants. So in our state, let's say you and I agree to do an armed robbery, but I say, you know what, we're just going to put our fingers in our jackets and pretend like we have guns. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to do it. But unbeknownst to me, you decide to bring a real gun. We go in there and you shoot up the place. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? I'm running away. It's like I pulled the trigger myself. And that's what party to a crime in Georgia means. So King Juan being alive or not being alive has no merit on it. It's not like he was testifying or anything like that. And so they could have brought charges against the others if they wanted to.
How did you feel when King Von got killed?
You know, my disappointment has just sort of gone away. It's like I'm so jaded now that it's just not unexpected. It's just like a matter of time is the way I look at it with these folks. I mean, you're rich, you're successful. Just put it behind you for the love of God. But sometimes people just can't. And so I felt bad, talked to Durk about it and all that kind of stuff. But
what did Durk say when you talked to him?
I mean, that's his good friend. I mean, he's hurt. And, you know, back then he wasn't famous and, you know, you lose contact over time. I'm just not one of those high profile lawyers or whatever. But sometimes you follow up with him, and now I know he's in custody in Los Angeles and he's got a tough time there. But it's just, it doesn't surprise me anymore. The thing that happened with Durk, I'm just like, what in the world is happening after we won our case?
Yeah.
He takes off, right? I mean, he just blows up. He's signed to much bigger record deals. He's performing with the musician out of Canada. That's whatever. Drake, the one sings about being sad all the time or whatever. And I'm just like, why do you have to do this stuff? Or, you know, renting private jets or hiring hits on people. It's just beyond me.
Yeah, no, my friend Drew Finley's actually representing him in that case.
Drew is in Atlanta, and he's an excellent lawyer, so he's in good hands.
Yeah, I love Drew. And after you helped him beat a attempted murder case, he is now in jail with a murder for hire, where the murder actually occurred.
Sure.
And now he's facing potentially life in prison.
Right.
Over, honestly, something that could have been avoided if he had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, if I can plug myself, it's like all these rappers that we had before they became super famous are now all clients of Drew. So I want to say I was there first and take some credit.
Well, and then most recently, you represented Hernandez Goan.
Yes.
Where you helped him beat his murder case over the whole young Dolph situation. And you actually sat in his part of the interview. So for everyone that actually wants to see in depth what you guys went through in court, you could watch the Hernandez interview. But congratulations on winning that. That was a big deal.
I think more so than winning, I think we exposed some of the underbelly that happens in Memphis and a lot of other cities. And that's where I take the greatest pride. I'm very happy for Hernandez and his family, but I'm hoping there might be some change and there might be some outcry because Dolph was so beloved. And I know his family's angry and all that. I really think they should be angry at the DA for bringing this case and filling their head full of ideas that somebody's done something that they couldn't prove. They're just aiming their anger at the wrong people.
At one point in time, being a celebrity meant that you were actually protected by the law, that DAs and police would like look the other way, and since they were fans of your work, they didn't want you to get bad press, and a lot of stuff would just kind of get brushed under the rug.
Right.
But these days, I feel it's the exact opposite. I feel that if you're a celebrity and you get charged for anything, suddenly it turns into a RICO. Suddenly it's a whole huge situation. And I feel that clout chasing has been happening with DAs and the feds more so than any time in history. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back about 30 years when the internet sort of was in its infancy, a lot of the stuff that happened before that, you can correctly say that it didn't happen. Like when I was at college in the 80s, football players could get drunk or whatever, the cops would take them back to the dorm, let them sleep them off.
Right.
Now everybody wants a scalp. Just because everybody's got a phone, everything's reported 24/7. Remember, CNN was just coming around and all that kind of stuff. So if you go back 30 years, you can directly see when everybody wants to be famous now. I got this guy, I'm going to be DA of the year because I got somebody famous.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be super defense lawyer because I got somebody acquitted. And the internet, social media has changed the perspective of everything. And now everybody decides they know if you're guilty, innocent, whatever it is, you're not going to change your mind. I think it's made it harder to get fair trials, but that's just the world we live in.
Well, and I feel a lot of these trials fall apart. You saw, for example, your trial is an example of one.
Sure.
With the Hernandez Govan trial. You saw A$AP Rocky beat his case.
Sure.
My man Joe Tacopino, we interviewed him about that. Of course, the YSL case. I've interviewed, a couple lawyers. Well, I interviewed Yak Gotti's lawyer who ended up winning in trial with a non-guilty verdict. Like these cases with these huge overreaching RICOs and gang ties and so forth, once it gets down to the jury, a lot of times these guys are being found not guilty. And there's millions of dollars that's spent in government money, whether it's the feds or the state, that ultimately just gets thrown out the window. It's a waste of everyone's time.
Well, if the defendants didn't have the money to challenge it, you would never say that because we'd never find out.
True.
So there's a lot of people. Remember that indictment for YSL started off with 30 some odd people or some outrageous number. Most of them pled guilty. And so if you have money, if you have resources, or if you have a lawyer willing to put in the time, you could find.
Well, Young Thug pled guilty.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Right. But
so did Gunna.
Right. And
the two biggest people pled guilty. So technically it was a win, but not really.
Right. But at that point, you're looking at 40, 50 years in prison. I mean, I'm going to sign the piece of paper. I mean, this is not a racial issue, but if you're a minority and I go to the jails to visit folks, they've been sitting there a year because they can't post bond or they don't have a bond. And the DA, through their public defender or their appointed lawyer, come in and say, well, we'll give him probation if he signs here. Now they've got you on paper for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And the whole cycle starts. And most of the lawyers don't have the time in trying to make a living, be it public defenders or appointed lawyers, because you have to do so much. In the old days, just a few years ago, you're getting $40 to $50 an hour as an appointed lawyer. You can't make a living on that as far as that goes. So it's all bleed and plead as fast as you can. And if you can get probation, bleed and plead.
Wow,
Get as
I've
much
never
money
heard
as you
that
can
before.
and plead it out because you need volume.
Bleed and plead.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you talk to just the average lawyer on the street as a criminal defense lawyer, they're not making much money. This isn't a very lucrative profession. You have the good fortune to meet with some of the higher end folks that are being hired by fancy musicians and stuff like that. But that's the overwhelming minority, less than 0.5% of 0.5% of lawyers that can afford to do these kinds of things. But the average guy, if you just went, down the street and there's some strip mall lawyer, not like a Better Call Saul kind of set, they're running 300 and 400 cases. How much attention you think one guy can give to that? And that's the reality of it. The guy running the food trailer out here, if he got in trouble, he's done.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. I'm going through a case right now. My lawyer is $950 an hour.
Whew.
And it's like, who could afford a lawyer like that aside of someone who actually has means?
Right.
Most people would have just dropped the case and walked away.
Right.
But the fact that I have the money and I could afford one of the top lawyers is a game changer. But most people end up just taking losses and pleading out and just giving up.
Yes.
Because most people just can't afford a proper defense. And on the flip side, people who get sued civilly are dealing with lawyers who take these cases on contingency. I don't know if you saw the whole argument with me and Tony Busby.
Yeah.
Where I was just sort of sickened by someone who claims they have 100 victims that have all been drugged and raped by Diddy.
Yeah.
But yet none of these victims were involved in the Fed case. One of which, claimed that Diddy and Jay-Z raped her when she was 13. Her own father said it was nonsense. The case was thrown out. Busby was sanctioned in New York and so forth. So it's just a system that I'm not always a fan of, which is why I try to bring in the top lawyers to kind of bring some clarity to the whole situation. And you're the latest of that top lawyer list.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And, good job with Hernandez, man. Wish you all the best.
Okay.
Take care. Peace.